In this lesson, we'll take a look at some of the common modeling tools that can be used with polygons. So we're just going to be starting with a blank scene. And so let's go ahead and bring in some primitive geometry to work with. So we'll go to the Create panel, and let's bring in a tube. Okay. Now we looked at drawing the tube out into the viewport. We can also create it using keyboard entry, which means we just input a radius. So input a particular number. In this case, I'll just put 1 in the inner, outer, and height, and go to Create. Okay, that's going to create our primitive right at the origin there. We can then go to our Modify panel and modify those values to get something closer to what we want. So in this case, I'll increase the radius 1 amount so we get something more like that. We can change the number of segments. In this case, we'll go ahead and dial the height segments down to 1. Okay, and you can see that we've got the sides set to 18. Okay, let's go ahead and bump those up just a little bit. And now we can see we've got a number of sides there, 24 to be exact. We don't have any cap segments. And so once we get this the way that we want, we now need to start doing some modeling on this. So let's look at some of the tools that we can access. Okay, now in order to be able to do the modeling, we need to actually convert this. So we'll take this model, right click, and convert it to an editable poly. Okay, now when we go down here under these rollouts, we'll just close them all up. Under editable poly here, you can see that we have a number of different rollouts. So we have one for editing geometry, okay, and then editing vertices. Now if we go in here and select, let's say, polygons, you can see that we have an edit polygons rollout, and this is going to give us a lot of tools that we're able to use. We can also access our graphite modeling tools up here on the modeling ribbon, and this will give us a lot of options for modeling as well. Okay, you can see we also have extrude up here, which is going to be a very common tool to use in modeling. Okay, now if we go into, let's say, an edge selection, you can see how some of those tools change. Okay, going in here, you can see that these are some a little bit different tools there versus the main graphite modeling tools. Okay, and we have options for adding loops, different options for extruding edges. Okay, and so there's a lot of different tools that we're able to use. You can see if we select the top level, these tools change, and we get things like Swift Loop, which is going to be very useful for us. Okay, so that's kind of the location of some of the tools. Let's take a look at how we can start to use those. Okay, so let's say we want to create kind of a wheel rim. And so I want to create a rim on this outer portion, but we don't have enough resolution here to do that. So we need to add edge loops. That's going to be a very common thing that you're going to want to do. And so we'll go to edges. And one of the ways that we can add edge loops would be to select the ring of edges. So in this case, that's going to be all the way around. So we'll go to selection, and we want to select the ring. So we've got all those edges selected. We'll go down here under the rollout. Okay. Under Edit Edges, we'll find Connect. Well, let's open up these settings. Okay, so you can see here we have Connect Edges. We have the number of segments. Let's change that to 2. You can see that it's interactive so that I can modify this however I want to. And it's not baked in yet. So I can change the pinch as well. So if I increase that value, you can see that those get pushed out away from each other versus decreasing that, they get pulled closer. So I want to push them all the way out to the ends. Okay, if I want to slide them around, I can slide them based on the slider. Now once I'm done, if I want to say OK and exit, I can go ahead and click on that. If I want to do another, add some more edges, I can go ahead and hit this, or if I want to exit out, I can click the X. So we'll just say OK, and that adds those edges. Now we have some resolution there to work with. So we can change our subobject selection, in this case to polygons, okay? And I want to select the loop of polygons, okay? So I can actually click and shift click to select that loop, and I'll hit Control to click this one, and then shift click to create or to select those polygons. Now we want to extrude. Extrude is going to be pulling out faces or polygons from the object while creating new polygons. So to illustrate this, we can either go here under our Edit Polygons rollout, or we can come up here in our graphite modeling tools, and we'll just again choose settings. Now you can see with these settings, it's not really doing what we would want it to do. So there are different options for how these extrudes happen. We'll go ahead and set this, instead of group, we'll set it to local normal. And that's actually going to just pull these out. If we set this to by polygon, it's going to treat those as individual polygons rather than an entire selection. In some cases, that's what we want. In this case, it doesn't happen to be what we want. So we'll go back to local normal, and we can change the value here by clicking and dragging until we have sort of the rim that we want. Okay. And then once we've got that, we can just say OK. All right. So now we can go ahead and do the same thing, let's say on the interior. So this time, instead of using our connect with the selection of edges, I'm just going to go to the top level, and let's go to Swift Loop. So with Swift Loop activated, you can see that I can interactively decide where I want to place that loop, and just click that in, and I'm ready to do the next one. So just find where I want to actually place that edge, click, and it's placed. And I'll just hit Q to get out of that tool. We'll go to a polygon selection and select that loop. And then we can go up here, let's say to extrude, go to our extrude settings, and then change those settings here. We'll say OK to that. So extrude and then inserting edge loops in different ways are going to be two of the most common tools that you're going to want to use. Okay. Now, if you want to actually get a smooth version of this, you can see where we've got, it's very faceted here. There are different ways that we can do this. We can go under our subdivision surface and simply turn on NURMS subdivision, or we can hit the NURMS button right up here, and you can see how we can smooth that out. Now, this is where adding edge loops comes in really handy, because you can see how everything is very smooth. That's because these edges are far apart. So if we were to go ahead and just grab the Swift Loop and start to drop edges in, you can see how that automatically tightens up those smooth areas. Okay. So you can see how that's tightened that up. Okay, coming up here, you can see how this is really smooth. We can really tighten that up by just adding edge loops. Okay, because that's taking the smoothing between those edges, and the closer the edges are, the tighter that's going to be. Okay, we can go ahead and select that, turn off our NURMS, and you can see where those edges have been added. Okay, let's go ahead and create something else. So I'm going to select this object. We'll keep it in our scene. We can create a layer, or we'll just go ahead and hide it. So we'll say hide selection. And let's create a bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cylinder primitive, because I think that matches the bolt shape as well as anything does. And I'll go ahead and drop that in. We'll go into our modify panel. Let's go ahead and increase the height a little bit to get kind of the shaft of the bolt shape there. And I want to increase the number of sides. So I'm going to go ahead and set the number of sides to, let's say, 24. And let's go ahead and increase the height segments as well. So I want to get quite a few height segments in there, maybe 14 or so. Okay. So now I want to create the thread. So I need to modify the sub-object. So I'm going to convert this, right-click, convert to editable poly, so that we can access the polygons. So go ahead and select polygons. Now I want to select basically the rows going up and down. So I'm going to select and then shift click. Control click, shift click. Okay, control will let me select the next loop. Shift click will let me select that entire loop. If I hit shift over here, it's going to select that entire loop going that way. So I'm going to control click and then shift click. Okay, and we'll do the same thing all the way around to create that selection. Okay, and control shift. Okay, So we've got the threads here, but I don't want them to go all the way up. So I'm going to actually add some polygons to that selection. So I'll just drag across to add those polygons. So we end up with a selection that looks something like that. Now I want to extrude those out. So we'll choose extrude. Okay. Now we don't want to extrude it based on the group. We want to extrude it based on the local normal. So we'll choose the local normal and then take that down quite a bit. So we end up with something like that. And we'll say OK to that. And then we can deselect. Okay. Now let's say I don't want to have the polygons at the top. I can very quickly and easily select those and hold down backspace, delete rather, to get rid of those polygons. And so the next thing we want to do is actually add a little bit of a twist to this. And we can do this using the modifier stack. Okay, so we'll go into the modifier list and choose a modifier. In this case, we know we want to twist it, so let's choose a twist modifier. It's going to jump right on top of the modifier stack here. Okay, so it's going to we're going to be able to modify this. Now, using the twist, you can see that we have twist parameters here. So we'll go ahead and change the angle. So you can see how that's twisting that entire thing. Okay. Now, if you're not seeing it, you can turn off the show end result. And if I click on the editable poly, it's not going to show the end result, which would be the top of the modifier stack. If I turn that on, it will show the end result no matter what I have selected. But even if that's off, if I select the twist, it's going to actually show that. We can turn off the influence of the twist by hitting that little button there. Okay. So now let's say I don't want to actually affect the top as much. And so I can limit the effect, and then we'll change the upper limit. And I'm just going to drag this up until it gets right to that point where the threads start. Okay. And then on top of the twist, if we want to smooth that out, we could add a mesh smooth if we want to, or a turbo smooth. Okay. And we can smooth that out. And so you can get something like that. Okay. It's taking the result of the editable poly, it's twisting it, and then it's smoothing the result. Okay. Very flexible workflow. We can also add the top by just adding another cylinder. And let's go ahead and we'll use keyboard entry to create our cylinder. Let's move it up into position here. Okay, and this one we'll go into modify, and let's change the number of sides, and we'll dial that down to 6. Okay, we'll increase the radius, decrease the height a bit. Okay, so we get something like that. Okay, we can look at the number of sides. We don't want that many height segments, so we'll take that down. And let's go ahead and convert this to an editable poly. Now, one of the key giveaways that something is CG is these completely hard edges. So we want to actually kind of cut those off a little bit. And to do that, we'll select the edges that we want to change. And so I'm just going to select all of the edges on top and bottom. Okay, and we want to actually chamfer those. And so under Edit Edges, there we go, chamfer. We'll go to Settings. And here you can see we can knock off those edges. So there's the value, so smaller value, again, tighter chamfer. We have the ability to add segments in there, so you can see we can start to round that off. Okay, and if we want to have it open, we can click on that. So if we want to have a straight kind of bevel there, chamfer, we can just use one. Otherwise, we can use a couple and create more of a circular line there. We'll say OK to that. Click off. And there you can see that we have a little bit more of a softer edge on there. Okay, so those are some of the common tools that you can use to build models. If you want to know more about modeling in 3ds Max, we do have an introduction to modeling in 3ds Max where you can go through that entire process of learning all of those tools and how those work. But for now, we just want to kind of get a good idea of where some of those tools are located and what some of the common tools are. Okay, so the next thing that we want to look at is how to actually create using NURBS. So we'll take a look at that in the next lesson.